Eric, my friend, good to see you again. Welcome to this channel, so to speak, I guess, where we talk about, all things that impact us in our world today and kind of weave emotional intelligence into that. For people who may not know you, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing now?
Sure. Well, and I don't know if this will go in the right order, Steve, but I'm the managing partner of Spirit of EQ. We're an emotional intelligence data and people development company based in the Midwest of the United States. And it's springtime here, so I'm kind of giddy because we made it through the winter. So I've lived in this area for probably the last 30 years or so. I'm married. I have two kids who are really not kids anymore. They're adults, two doodles, golden doodles. And
Nice.
been an entrepreneur for probably close to 20 years. I have
Hmm.
scars to show for it, as I'm sure you know what that's all about.
Oh, yeah.
And really, the thing that really makes this powerful for me is that I found probably about 5 years ago, like the key reason why I'm here and what I'm here to do. What's my contribution, I guess, is maybe a way of saying it. And Spirit of EQ happens to be the portal in which that gets
Hmm.
poured out. So that's a little bit. There's a lot more, but
Tell me a little bit about, if I don't know anything about Spirit of EQ, what is Spirit of EQ?
So, from a naming perspective, it really has to do with this idea that we are working with people's their spirit. I like to sort of equate it to what makes that person one of one, because that's the driving force behind anything and everything. Because, and boy, do I feel it some days.
Hmm.
Life is brief, and
Yeah.
at the end of the day, if we're not taking care of that spirit where all these other things flow from, we're probably not going to have that meaningful life that we desire. And there's layers to that. I get, everybody's different and has a different perspective potentially, but
Hmm.
the sort of the motivation of the company was to address that. Now, what comes from that? Yeah, emotional intelligence is a key area. It goes hand in hand with that. Okay, what makes me one of one? Because as I know, Steve, it's our emotions, those
Yeah.
neurotransmitters. They're a message from you to you that's happening every single day, wanting us to pay attention. So everything that we've created within Spirit of EQ is to help people move forward in that regard and move to breakthroughs. I mean, quite
Yeah.
simply put.
Yeah. Yeah. And for those who may not have heard my introduction in previous videos, I'll just do something pretty quick here. My work dovetails very closely with Eric's work. We're certified in some of the same things, many emotional intelligence assessments and psychometric assessments. And more than that, coaching and tools and processes to really help people unlock the potential within themselves. And if you go to our website, eqfit.org, it's very specific. The first thing you're going to see is equipping people to prosper. And that comes from inside. That comes from right in here. And so through the different online courses and coaching and training and facilitating and speaking and all of that, those methods that I use and that I know Eric uses as well, we help people better equip themselves to prosper in life. And all of that, it ties together. I mean, I have a lot of owners look at me and say, just leave those emotions at the door. And I ask them, how well is that working for you? Because the reality is, none of us can do that. Life comes into work and work comes into life. And home comes into things and family and relationships and all of that. And it's all part of our makeup and who we are. And the better we understand how to deal with that and the emotions that are generated, the better we can enjoy life more and be more successful, have more satisfaction, a more of a sense of well-being. Eric, I'm very thankful you're on with me today. I want to ask you a couple of questions. I've heard some things come up recently around AI, artificial intelligence. And at the same time, I'm hearing that in many ways we're seeing a decline in the human dynamic of what's going on in our world. Talk to me about that. What are you seeing?
Yeah, that one is really a hot button issue for me, because it didn't just start with AI, and I'm going to qualify too. I'm not anti-technology, Steve. I think it's wonderful. It's improved our lives in many respects. But in many respects, I think AI is a symbol of a greater problem. And is that emphasis on this hyper, let's find the most technologically fast lane as possible to advance us to be able to do things quicker, easier, more efficient, all of that. And again, on its face, that makes total sense. You'd be sort of crazy not to want that to a degree. But the thing that really gets me is that we don't stop and go, well, okay, how is it that it seems like technology is doing this and human beings are doing that? It doesn't seem like those two marry up very well. And quite frankly, I sometimes, and maybe it's me being the uber optimistic, strange from another planet kind of guy, I really do believe, and I'm speaking of this, Steve, from the standpoint of the people that I interact, my clients, my neighbors, they're beyond being decent people. They're good people. And I think they're worth development. I mean, why would we not pour all the resources possible to make their lives stronger, wiser, healthier, all of the above?
Right.
And I think sometimes the message is AI will take care of that for us. And I don't think so. And quite frankly, when you look at the data around just the condition, right, of our spiritual, our mental, our physical, and emotional health, I don't think any scientist out there, research scientists, would say, "Oh, no, 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 Eric, you're wrong. Human beings, at least in the United States, we're tracking right there with AI. We're healthy. We're prosperous in that regard, right?" And it really, quite frankly, makes me quite concerned about from a societal standpoint, because quite frankly, Steve, what good is all this advanced technology if human beings are on this trajectory in the opposite direction? You know, you kind of alluded to something. I'll say this real quick. When you talked about, this idea about how's that working out for you, leaving emotions at the door type thing, right? And anymore, because I hear that, I'll say things like, well, let me give you an example why I think that might be deficient. And I said, let's say that I tell you, after I leave my appointment with you, I'm going to go out to my car and I'm going to get rid of one of my tires because I don't need it. I'm fine. You would tell me, wait a minute, you need that tire to work with the other three tires for you to get to where you need to go. But if I just throw one off to the side, you're going to say, you're crazy. That's not going to work. But what do, Steve? Leave the emotions out of it. Leave the spiritual out of it. And look at the results. So from that standpoint, that's the part that has concerned me about AI and technology in general in its ascent.
Yeah, I love that focus because when I work with salespeople, us directors, vice presidents of sales, call it what you want, business development, even fundraising. When I work with those people, there is this incredible excitement and curiosity around AI. And the AI organizations are selling it very heavily around it's going to replace all of this stuff. It's going to do this stuff for you. They don't call it artificial intelligence for nothing. Okay, let's be honest about it. It isn't a human being. It isn't adaptable like a human being's brain is, and it isn't going to solve all your problems. I know just from that sales arena, I know from selling that sales happen between two people, and they happen in the shared mind space that is created by the salesperson who invites in the buyer, and they share this shared mind space together, and they work together. And if if everything goes well, then the buyer is served well and the salesperson is served well. And both organizations prosper because of that. Well, the AI part of that is really only on the front end, or maybe on the intelligence end, but none of the intelligence, none of the lead generation, none of that matters if there isn't a human being involved in the process. And the more that we take the human element out, and the more, if you want to be a commodity in the workplace, then sell out to AI. I'm not saying AI is bad. Don't hear what I'm not saying.
Right.
I'm not saying it's bad. What I'm saying is it's a tool like any other tool. It is not the ultimate hammer where everything then turns into a nail. It doesn't work that way.
No, and Steve, I mean, I like how you alluded to the idea of a tool. It's a tool that we can use that I would hope that it would be used to help to make me a better human being, to increase my performance as a human being, not as a replacement or a competition. And sometimes, and I don't want to, I want to say this, I want to over spiritualize. I sometimes think that this is a case of the pursuit of being God. And I know some of your, maybe a number of your listeners in your audience, viewers, they might say, well, don't go, and trust me, I'm not trying to define a sect or a denomination, but it just seems like this idea that we're going to be that, right? And it's like that part of me that goes, well, you can't, because you can't take situations and put that in front of me and put that in front of you and expect that we both are going to deliver the same response and outcome. Because Steve, I mean, let's look at the analogy of driving on a freeway. You're on the freeway a mile ahead of me. I get cut off, you get cut off. Steve, you might get angry as a hornet.
Right.
I might get as frightened as a deer.
Yeah.
So, and that's just two human beings on a freeway. Two.
With the same exact catalyst, right?
Exactly.
We both got cut off, but because of our patterns and our experiences and our personalities and the way we're designed and created, we approach things differently. And that's why, and in many ways, I think, Eric, you've hit on something really important here. And it's why a lot of owners that I work with say, please leave the emotions at the door. Because if you think about it, we will all react to the same thing a bit differently, sometimes massively differently. But that is the beauty of the human dynamic. We are uniquely made in a way with our own experiences, our unique life, our unique personality. When all of that comes together, and there is definitely a spiritual side to that. What do we believe is bigger than ourselves, and how do we relate to that? When all of that, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it kind of goes back to that one of one. I mean, if Steve is one of one and I am one of one, that implies there is a uniqueness there that cannot be addressed in this mass approach, right? And I get it. Organizations have different guardrails and processes, policies, and all the rest. At a high level, that's healthy. It's for the same reason I say it's healthy to have traffic lights. I mean, we all need to know that when the light is red, we need to stop. But I think when we start trying to remove the nuance out of each human being, I think that's trouble, because I don't, not only do I think it's dangerous, but I mean, I don't know how rich of a world it would be to live in if the nuance gets stomped out.
Yeah, and talking to anybody who's listening here on the business side of things, if you're a business owner, if you're a business leader, the only way you get a competitive advantage in the marketplace is through your people, because any technological advance will last for about that long, and then everybody else will have the same technological advance. Maybe you can patent something, maybe you can do this or that, and maybe that gives you an advantage for a period of time. But the real long-term competitive advantage comes through people. People are your most important asset. And I know I'm preaching a little bit here, but bottom line, if you see people as your most important asset, there is no limit to what you can achieve, because all of the good stuff comes out of that: culture and values and mission and vision and impact on the community and teamwork. And none of that comes out of AI. None of that comes out of technology. Those are tools for us to use to be better at what we do,
Yeah, and
but
I
not to
totally,
replace it.
yeah, well, and I guess maybe sort of a tail on that is I I firmly believe again in the idea of advancement and technologies, sort of the engine of that happening. I just get real concerned, Steve, and you and I both in our companies, we're on the front lines. We're rubbing shoulders with people, and we're seeing and hearing things that, at least I can speak from my vantage point, and I don't want to jump too far ahead of you, but I get my sense is you're hearing it too. Um, there's a tremendous level of anxiety.
Yeah.
There's a tremendous level of confusion. Uh, and quite frankly, and it probably would take another show to discuss it, the use of substances in order to medicate from all of those things. And I realize I'm a big believer in personal responsibility. I'm responsible for me and to take care of me and to make good decisions. However, I think if our resources maybe were channeled a little bit more toward addressing the things that are really going to be sustainable, and to me, yeah, I'm a believer. I believe that human beings are the most valuable asset, and in our case, in the United States, that we have.
Yeah.
And to make that an afterthought or something that we'll get to it later, all in the name of a new technology that, to your point, it's going to have a bright light for a bit, but eventually it will fade and we'll be on. But I just, like I said, it's a hot button one for me.
No, and I'm glad we're talking about that. I'm going to take just a minute and connect some dots. You talked a minute ago about stress and anxiety, and I'm going to add to that burnout and lack of well-being and all kinds of other things. Where does that come from? Well, it comes from us trying to control things that we don't necessarily have the ability to control. And that's when you think of what we're talking about here with heightened technologies and all of that. The whole purpose is to have a better handle on control. And what happens is when you don't get the results you want, wherever it is up and down the line in an organization, it creates stress, it creates quiet quitting, which is a part of burnout. I see quiet quitting as an entry level to burnout. And when all of that happens, you start to lose engagement, you start to get lower productivity, lower profitability, you get into a very unhealthy organizational environment. And it all starts with the desire to control things instead of create, and instead of innovate, and instead of elevate. And the elevate part is what I want to spend a second on. Elevate people. Because if we can elevate people, then all of these tools become that much more impactful. But if we don't elevate people, there's going to be no curiosity, no desire, no want to. when it comes to that. So I think we have to be careful, and I'm going to use this term. I think we have to be careful what we worship in business, because if it's the almighty dollar and if it's new technologies and the new bright shiny thing and all of that, but we forget about those people entrusted to us that we're not focused on as much. I mean, we're all going through stuff,
Yeah.
and a lot of it's hard stuff. So, we are designed to be in community. And I think a good way to filter new technology is this: does it add to community or does it take away from community?
Ooh, wow, that's that's powerful, Steve. Yeah.
If it adds to community, great, let's do it. Take on that new technology. If it takes away from community, and community is teamwork and personal satisfaction and well-being and all of those other kinds of things that are so important in organizations. And that's what an organization is: a group of people coming together for a shared purpose and shared values. And if we're not promoting the community side of that, a lot of that goes away. So
Yeah.
maybe we put a filter in place that says, does this add to or take away from our community? Because
Yeah.
it's our people that get things done.
Yeah. I love the simplicity of that. It's yeah, I'm totally with you there.
Yeah. Eric, last time we connected, you raised an interesting subject, and that was energy versus time.
Mm.
Can you give me, I mean, for whoever's watching, can you go into that a little bit more? Because that's just fascinating to me.
Yeah. Well, I'm still learning, and it's hard. It really is. And I've gone through these different stages of it because it was first introduced to me, and I almost would say it was flippantly delivered by a speaker, right? And I think maybe I didn't know the person like super well, so I don't want to judge, but it seemed like it was just like a cool thing to say, right? You
Right.
know, one of those things you walk and go, "Ooh, I'm inspired." Yeah, I like that idea. But the implementation of it is another matter. So early, now this is probably halfway through my entrepreneur journey. Um, I was trying to shed a lot of corporate skin. And corporate skin for me, I was in corporate America for a number of years before I struck out on my own. And shedding that skin was, you start at this time, you get a break at this time, and then you stop at this time. And then in between and after and all the rest. But it was just rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. So as an entrepreneur, especially when I first got out into that world, I was a solo entrepreneur. So I mean, if you wanted to fire the boss, look in the mirror, because that's who it was, right? And
I
and
resemble that, by the way.
right. Well, there's some days where I think I'd like to fire the managing partner, but so it's interesting. I found that I'd get really anxious if I wasn't starting at a certain time.
Hmm.
Getting up from my desk, you can't get up. You need to stay and do another this and do another that. It's not time yet. Oh, it's 11:45. I can get up and I'm going to get lunch, but I got to get back by 1 o'clock, and
Right.
rinse and repeat, right? And it just wasn't working. And at some point, I finally realized, and it was prompted certainly by that little blurb of, manage your time and manage your energy and not your time. So fast forward, I started to listen to a gentleman by the name of Andrew Huberman, and he has a podcast called Huberman Labs. I think that's what it's called. He's a neuroscientist out of Stanford. He's a very, for lack of a better way of saying it, he's very plain and down to earth in his approach, even though he's talking about obviously a lot of science, which I love. It's very approachable. But he started talking about, and I'm not going to get the terminology inside of the neuroscience world, but about how we have these certain periods of a given day when we are at our most effective.
Mhm.
And for the short of it, Steve, is that most human beings have a maximum of 3 of them, and he called them 90-minute windows. Some people have 2, some people have 1, blah blah blah. So that moved me to figure out, well, what are mine? And I discovered that I have 1 in the morning hours and I have 1 in the early afternoon. And it was hard, Steve, because the idea that I would only see that there's 3 hours where I'm totally locked in, going to be effective, get things done. It was contrary to the corporate model that I was in.
Yeah.
Right. So I took the shot and I practiced and I reverted back a couple of times and all of the above. But what I found is that it's true. You manage your energy, you manage where and the time of the day where you are most effective. Because in the corporate world, at least the world that I ran in, you would never embrace diminishing return. We did not want to hear that, because it was this belief that, well, if I just do a little bit more, or if I spend a little more time on this, then I'm going to get a result. It's going to pay me back. So to tell someone like, well, guess what? You maxed out at this number of hours. Everything after that, diminishing return. It would drive you, because, you build these neural pathways, Steve,
Right.
and you hold on to them. So in short, it has become my go-to for how I operate in my day. And it's not a perfect science by any stretch. It's only this and this. Sometimes it gets varied. But I had to start also thinking about what was the impact of how I manage today on my health, mental,
Yes.
physical, right? And, if you've been on the road long enough, you start to realize, well, I got more time behind me than I do in front of me. I want to make the best of it.
Yeah. Let's not talk about that right now.
Right. Well, and here's what I'm saying, man. Yes, I hope we all live to 120 and die in our sleep, but the reality I started to wake up to, that it also had some benefits and impact on those things too.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you're saying here. And there's a couple of things I want to kind of tie in. We know from research that the way we should work is an hour that we work, there should be 45 to 50 minutes of focus and 10 to 15 minutes of non-focus. Just get away, do something else, if you're going to be in that hourly model. Now, here's what's really interesting about what you're saying, because I've had many clients come to me and say, okay, this whole virtual workplace is driving us crazy. It was great right when we first had it happen and we all pulled together, and for about a year during the pandemic we worked well and our productivity stayed great and all of that. But here's what's happening now is people are tired. They're tired of change. There's change exhaustion going on, weariness. There is this new virtual and hybrid workplace has created challenges none of us foresaw. We knew that there would be challenges. We didn't know what they would be. We now know a lot more about that. And part of what I'm starting to say to people around this whole concept, because usually it comes back to, we're not getting a full 40 hours out of our people. And I ask them, why do you need 40 hours out of your people? Of course, they give me that look, right? Like, are you insane? And I go, time out. What if you, in a perfect world, what if you could set this whole time and hourly focus to the side and you now pay people on accomplishments? Okay, so this person has certain things they need to get done on a daily basis, and they need to be able to do these projects in a timely manner, meeting the deadlines and all of that. What if we switched to an accomplishment-based compensation program where people could flex their time, because what you're saying is spot on. I have 3 of those times in my day, and I can tell you exactly when they are, Eric. They are mid-morning, they are mid-afternoon, and they are from about 8 o'clock at night to 9:30. I am extremely productive. As a matter of fact, and it's weird, maybe it's just me, that is my most creative time. When I'm creating online courses, when I'm cutting and editing videos and putting, messaging together and things like that, the
Yeah.
most creative time of my day, I save that 90-minute segment between 8 and 9:30 at night for that specific purpose. It's when I create blog articles. It's when I do my podcast episodes, because that, and I don't know why. Maybe it's because, and you said something so appropriate here. We have been indoctrinated in a certain cultural aspect of work ethic, 40 hours plus, work hard, don't stop, persevere, push. Well, and I'm a boomer, so that's just the generation. And the problem with that is it works, but there is a point of diminishing returns.
Yeah.
And
And Steve, what you're saying, because my gut tells me you've probably had these kind of coaching conversations. A number of managers and leaders, they get nervous about the idea of what you just described as far as accomplishment, compensation versus hour, right? And I think that there's an opportunity there, because if that manager is afraid, that's where we say, stop. What are you afraid of?
yeah,
I'm afraid that they're not going to be doing their work and they're going to be watching ESPN. And okay, so where does that fear come from? I mean, because until that manager leader can actually understand what's the messaging behind that emotion, they're just going to revert to we just can't do that. This is the way it is, and we must go back. And that's because from a brain perspective, that's safer. Let's just keep doing it like we did it
yeah.
before. And I don't think sometimes these leaders understand that it's not only an issue about whether or not you embrace virtual or hybrid or even what we're talking about. Because if you've got a fear that's there and consistently comes up for you, you and I both know, Steve, it's trying to get your attention about something.
Absolutely, it's a message.
Yeah.
There's an embedded message in there, but if you're not opening the message and reading the message, then you're not getting the message, so to speak. And you and I both know fear is primarily around a loss of control. Most of the time, that's where fear comes from, especially in our world today. I mean, you and I don't have to beat back saber-toothed tigers on a regular basis. So,
Right.
yes, there are still some survival moments in our lives, usually brought on by new technologies like driving cars and things like that.
Right.
Back to getting cut off on the highway.
Right. Yeah.
But these are important messages, because you said something that triggered another thought. I was talking to a very well-known business coach. She's very highly regarded and respected. And it was so funny. I actually hired her as my coach for about a year, and she really helped me a lot. And that's the value of a coach. But it was funny because we were just having a kind of conversation like this, and almost immediately, both of us said, there is no model for this. Meaning, all of those old models of how to do business, they're just not going to work in the new reality. Now, I'm not saying throw them all out. There's good stuff in those models. But if all you're relying on is old models for new challenges, think of it this way: old skills for new challenges. Do you think for new challenges you might need some new skills, maybe some new models and methods? And I think, I know people are tired of change,
Yeah.
but there is a way to look at change as an opportunity and not a problem. And if you can be change embracing, you don't have to take every change that comes your way. That's be smart, be wise about what you choose to change, but don't resist change just because it's a change. I mean, you could very easily be limiting your success, limiting your satisfaction in life by doing that. And that's not helpful. Um, Eric, I think this is going to move into a conversation. You've really done a deep dive over the last several years on EQ, emotional intelligence. What role is EQ playing in your life today?
That's a great question, and I'll kind of leave it, or I'll focus it in on the personal side of my own development, because we can talk about certifications, we can talk about who we're
Right.
working with, and all of the concepts, and those are great, and that's not my to say they're not, but I mean, at the end of the day, if emotional intelligence is not actually practically helping me on a day-to-day basis, then you probably have to question, is it as valuable as maybe we are advertising it to be? Fortunately, Steve, yeah, it is as valuable as we advertise. And that's why the sacrifices of being an entrepreneur. And I tell people consistently, it's the hardest and most rewarding work I've ever done.
Mm.
And that ties very directly into my calling, why I believe God put me on this planet, that for this time, for these events and these experiences, my time to be here. So lately, it's been more of that tool for, how would I say it, listening to those messages with more intentionality and clarity. And what I mean by that is, I wouldn't believe I'm alone in this. There are certain emotions that are connected to certain past memories, experiences, traumas, and all of that.
Mm.
And one of the easiest things to do when you get that message is to just shut the door, turn the volume down, move, leave the room, whatever. And what I'm finding, I have an autoimmune disease that is impacted by stress. So if I'm dealing with major stress, it is going to have a negative impact on the results of that, me managing that autoimmune disease. And it became very, very clear to me that managing stress as a by the way was not going to be okay. So for me, it's the process of going, okay, where are the sources of the stress? And I get there's the stress of you're stuck in traffic. There's stress of, my gosh, you're watching the Final Four. Is your team going to win? How close or how far? Even though my bracket was like totally nothing, but
Wiped.
yeah, totally wiped. But it is this idea that practicing and that intentionality. Okay, what's behind that? Where does that come from? What's going on whenever that happens? You're tending to feel X. And are you willing to slow down enough to let that emotion communicate its full message?
Mm.
And I got to tell you, Steve, that there's certain parts of it is like, I don't like this,
Yeah.
because it reveals a deficiency. It reveals something that's faulty. But the beauty of it's kind of that reframing, right? The beauty of it is, yes, your oil filter is faulty and dirty. It's not that, oh, you're a terrible car owner. You shouldn't be allowed to drive. No, it's you go and get the oil changed, where they will give you a new oil filter so that that problem can be solved.
Right.
Or from that perspective, just by way of analogy. So it's made a difference in paying attention. It's made a difference in my management of that stress.
Mm.
And then probably the last one, and I use this a lot in the work, is this idea of empathy. And at the beginning stages of the work inside of the EQ realm, somebody say, well, how would you define empathy? Well, yeah, it's ability to respond appropriately to the emotions and others and yourself, and whatever, right? We read that off. But I saw a video from Brene Brown. It was an interview that Oprah did with her, and it was in late 2021. And I was never a big Brene Brown fan. And it wasn't that she said something I like offended me or I totally disagreed with. It was just it's the reason why I like Miles Davis and not Travis Tritt. I mean, there's nothing wrong. It's just I
Right.
prefer, and when I hear Miles Davis play, it does something for me. Same deal. But I happened to see this video, so I'm kind of queuing in. She's saying some cool things, and she went to a direction of I'm rethinking this idea about empathy. I think I got it wrong. So then I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that's a pretty big statement from someone of your, accomplishment and stature and
Right.
all that. And she said, and I'm probably poorly paraphrasing it, the only way that you can truly empathize with someone is, sorry, that's my security detail in the background.
That's all right.
Um, so what happened was she said that in order to truly know where someone is at, is you need to listen to their story and believe them.
Mm.
That's the only way that you can know. It's the only way that you can begin to have a pathway. And I found myself thinking about the number of times when someone would say, well, my husband is diagnosed with X, or my son got in trouble because he was doing Y.
Mm.
And me going, oh, I'm sorry that happened to you. That has to be tough. I once had something, and I'm going, well, wait a minute. How much do I really know with just a sentence? So the adjustment, Steve, was okay. Tell me about your story. Tell me about what's going on. Tell me about what happened, and just listen. And you know what, Steve? And she included this in the video. The really, really tough part is believing them, because
Yeah.
believing them means, Steve, you may tell me that life on Mars is the real deal and we should get there as soon as possible. We should colonize it. But Steve, if you start to utter that, and then after 2 seconds, I go, Steve, that's crazy. That doesn't know what's wrong with you. I mean, and I'm just waiting for you to stop so I can tell you how wrong you are, instead of tell me more, Steve. Where did you get the information? What does it mean to you? And you know what? It's not a roundabout way for me to be able to convince Steve that he needs to change his mind.
Yeah.
And the power of that, what I have found, is that it builds trust and they feel heard. And Steve, I really firmly believe one of the ailments, if I can compare it, one of the major, it's almost epidemic, is people not feeling like they've been heard.
Oh, agreed. I mean, Gallup tells us that 68% of people in the workplace never get any feedback. Well, no wonder they're all leaving.
Yeah.
I mean,
and Steve, add to that, right? The idea that somehow, and this was the part that chills me, and we've even been talking about creating a format or some type of forum where people can go to be heard. I just want to have because I think we would be shocked at how many people we run into, the people that we have relationship with, who go through multiple days and no one's listening.
Wow.
I think we would be shocked. And I think in many ways, that video is a catalyst for me to look at empathy through a different lens. And as you know, empathy is a powerful competency in EQ. So those are probably the three where it's really showing up in the most recent sort of frame.
Yeah. And thank you very much for sharing that, Eric. And, the thing that stands out for me as I listen to you, and you are being heard, is you can hear someone, listen to them, and believe them, but you don't have to agree with them. You don't lose anything by believing in somebody, by believing what they're telling you, by believing what their perceptions are. That's when we dive down deep enough. This is what this is all about. People live in their perceptions. Their perceptions are their reality. And it does not hurt us in any way to believe that they believe what they believe, if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes total sense. And that's exactly right, Steve, because I've used this to explain to folks that, again, it is not a call that you need to change what you believe in order to match up with what they believe, and so you can agree. That's not the point. And I think the majority of people, if they feel like they're being heard and that you believe them, they're probably okay that you may see the world differently, because it is
Yeah.
such a it's such a testament to your, I mean, just as a human being, that, okay, let me clear this off and you talk, I want to listen. And again, I think we would be aghast at how many people go through days of where nobody is listening. And to your point, it does not rob you of anything. It does not take anything away from you. And matter of fact, it benefits you. And it's especially leaders of people. If you do that, if you can listen and believe their story,
Yeah.
I mean, those people will probably run through fire and brick walls for you.
Yes.
Because
absolutely. And this goes back to the difference between technology and human beings, the human dynamic and community, and how important the competitive advantage that you're going to get with people is. And there, I'm going to share, I shared this in a blog recently, but I'll share it. A quick story. When I was in high school, I was on the golf team, but I wasn't a big athlete. I mean, let's be honest. Look at what you got here, right? And this is the funny part. For those who don't know, I'm 5'4" tall. Okay, so I'm just a lot packed in a short package. But for whatever reason, we decided to put together an intramural volleyball team. Think about this: volleyball, 5'4". Okay. And I don't know how high that net is, but it's pretty high up there. Anyway, the funny part about that was, and this proved a lot to me in my young life, we started to win. It just a bunch of guys, a couple of three from the golf team and a couple of guys we knew that were friends, and we started to win, and we're just having fun. I mean, we're just there to have fun and have some exercise and all of that. And we kept winning and we kept winning, and we're looking at each other like, this is so much fun. We don't know what we're doing.
Right.
But we got into the finals, and we played against, guess who? The team with all the top athletes in the school. And they beat us so bad in the first game that, it was like, yeah, and they were so cocky. And, we all just kind of gathered around after the first game, and we're laughing. And I'm sure the other team is looking at us going, what is wrong with those dweebs over there? They're all laughing about getting beat so bad. But we were just having fun, and we enjoyed each other. We loved playing together. We loved just being around each other and all of that. And then we came back in the second game, and we beat them pretty soundly. And then we beat them in the third game and took the championship with no reason in the world we should have done that. But you know what the difference was? Team. It was the heart of the team. That's what gave us the power to succeed in the face of a huge challenge that we shouldn't have been able to overcome. Right. Yeah. And so these are real experiences that we've all seen in our lives. We've all seen the underdog team beat the big team. And if you've been a part of that yourself, like I was, that's exciting stuff. And you know what it does? It gives you some confidence to carry with you during life. And I appreciate what you're saying. And I think, Eric, that's why you and I are in the same kind of work, is we know that 66% of people in the United States right now self-identify as being lonely, no matter what their relationship status is.
Yep.
That's 2/3 of our population are identifying as being lonely. Well, if we can create vibrant and healthy places for people to come and be in community and learn these life skills that are making all the difference. I'm going to transition because something has that struck me. I was sitting in a room of business owners. I get together once a month with a group of business owners. It's about 12 of us. Get together once a month, and it's a part of a bigger curriculum, and we learn business practices and all of that. And I was sitting around, and this last month was all about training and development and people, which of course is my bread and butter. And I'm going, yes, let's do more of this.
Yeah, right.
Because I can share a lot of my experiences and all of that, my expertise. But as I'm listening to all these owners of businesses, some small, some big businesses, the thing that struck me was as they were walking through the curriculum, the top need in training and development in every one of those owners' minds was soft skills. And I just had an epiphany moment that said the foundation of soft skills, no matter what soft skill it is, the foundation is emotional intelligence. Mm-hmm. There is no question in my mind, because if you think about what soft skills are, so professionalism, what's that? Work ethic, taking personal ownership, showing up on time, behaving correctly at work and in meetings and all of that. And then you have thinking, decision-making, problem-solving, critical thinking, abstract thinking, innovation. All of those are terribly hindered by people living in a negative emotional environment.
Yeah.
You cannot access your higher cognitive functions if you are having these cycles of negative emotion. And I shouldn't call them negative emotions, but it's emotions that impact you negatively. They draw down your energy, they draw down your focus, they drain you of those important resources. Well, those are soft skills as well, as are interpersonal communication, crucial conversations, feedback, conflict resolution, relationship building. Those are all part of interpersonal communications. And I'm sitting here literally making this list of soft skills as I'm listening to what they're saying. And I can relate every one of those back to a foundation of emotional intelligence. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I like where you were going that as far as what you were saying, especially the foundational nature of EQ. And that's typically something that we march to very early on when we're talking to existing and prospective clients, right? So that they understand that, well, one, it's not going to hinder any other training and development efforts that you have. It's just going to support those, as you just. But I think one thing that happened, and really I thought about as you were mentioning these owners listing soft skills as the top need, right? And if you've been in the people development business as long as we have, Steve, pre-pandemic, sometimes you'd get yeah, that sounds like that'd be cool. Let me get back to me in the fourth quarter and we'll see what we have budget wise. It was a take it or leave it, nice to have. And yeah, there were some organizations that were very laser focused on it. But I think what the pandemic did, it pulled the rug out from underneath everyone. Mm-hmm. And by that, it also created the kind of problems and opportunities that we never would have seen coming. And we just, it's foreign to us, right? And I think it exposed something in our sort of the work or business structure. We had been writing for so long, Steve, on our logic, our intellectual powers, right? And it delivered, quite frankly. If you said, hey, did we get the results? Quarterly earnings, bonuses, sales, turnover, all the rest, we could point to progress. And then these problems arose from this, again, who would ever thought happened event, right? And those problems cannot be solved by the intellectual logic alone anymore.
Right.
And I think it points to there is an awakening. And I'd love for our audience to understand that we're talking about not one or the other. It's not me saying, oh, Steve, we now need to be more emotion driven. What we're saying is, let's let our thinking and our emotions come together,
Yeah.
and let them work together as a team. Kind of go back to my car analogy. No more driving on three wheels. You need four, and they need to work together, and they need to do that consistently. And then all of a sudden, I think we'll get to a place, Steve, where it will no longer be soft skills. It'll be, well, we've got to have the foundation of EQ here. That's what
Right.
we've got to have first. And
Right.
then we can start to build on all those different things that you mentioned. Because I think without that, I'm going to say these things in a very cryptic way, but I think we're doomed to fail, because we're not going back to pre-pandemic. I think the idea of what that world was and what is now and what is to come, and I say that with some optimism too, right? I really do. I mean, I don't see this as doom and gloom. All I'm saying is that, Steve, if I had been driving with three wheels and you came upon me and said, Eric, hey, I think if you put that fourth wheel that you used to think wasn't important, you put that on, get the tires balanced, right? Make sure the alignment's good. You'll be able to get to your next destination. And Steve, I may say, Steve, I feel so embarrassed that I threw away that tire. And what does that say about me? Maybe I'm not what I thought I should be. Steve, you're going to say, it's okay, Eric. We just got to deal with the problem that's in front of us.
Right.
It's going to be okay. I'm of that camp. It's not a you better or the end is near. It's not it's not doom and gloom. It's doom and gloom if you're going to say, yeah, I'm not listening to that. We're going to go back to the way we did it in 2015, and we're going to work harder, and that's doom and gloom for me, because I'm thinking that just is not going to work. So to your points and the things that you heard in that room, I find that's pretty inspiring that they're catching the need for that. My hope is that whether it's those executives and owners, is that we're starting to get maybe a groundswell that, okay, this is a foundational thing. This should be included in as a baseline thing that we do.
Yeah. And I think there are a couple of things that I think are driving this paradigm shift that we're in. One is talent, because, and I want to express that very clearly. I've had at least two owners call me and say, I'm done with this virtual workplace nonsense. Everybody's coming back in the office. What's my risk? And I literally said to them, 15 to 20%, you'll lose between 15 and 20% of your employees, and they're probably going to be your better employees. And of course, they're shocked. Well, why would that happen? Well, here's the other side of that talent equation. We recently did a search for a very high-end executive assistant. I mean, this is a super high-end, serving a C-suite, and very, very good paying job. But they absolutely demanded that person be in the office 5 days a week. And of the literally thousands of applicants for that position, we came down to two that were willing to do that. So we need to realize that things have changed. It doesn't mean that we can't adapt and modify as we go forward, but the mindset has changed. If it takes 90 days to create a new habit, we just gave people 2 or 3 years in a new work environment. Okay, now you're asking them to completely shift away. And how convenient was it for people to be with their kids and take them to school and do their work and do all of this other stuff and get, honestly, more of a balanced lifestyle?
Right.
a true balance between work and life. And I'm not saying that's the way it has to be, but we cannot ignore the reality of what's going on out there. And so if we arbitrarily come in and go, nope, I want it to change back to what I want, how well does that work with you when you've got a whole bunch of family around and you tell all of them, no, we're all going to do what I want to do? How well does that really? It doesn't work very well. At least it
No.
hasn't for me. So
Well, and I would be in that camp. And Steve, your example, I can, which you just laid it out as far as the question asked of you and your answer to what they were going to lose. I saw that play out in a Fortune 500 company in a large division,
wow.
and the decision of it's going to be this way or there's no other way. And I remember this friend of mine telling me, I've already heard from probably about 15 to 20% of the people that are in this group that said, no, sorry, I'll move on.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought to myself, okay, are you really willing to die on that hill?
Yeah.
I mean, for lack of a better analogy, right? Because I'm going, I mean, because you do realize it's not just they leave and then the new ones come in, because you're going to have to go through the recruitment process.
Oh,
And I'm sorry.
recruitment, onboarding, training.
Right.
Think of the
And
institutional knowledge you lose.
exactly. Right. And I'm laughing, Steve, because I'm thinking as you're listing those things, and all that's free, right? That doesn't cost any money to recruit. It doesn't cost any money, right? And I'm going, why would you do that? And
Yeah.
again, I totally get it. If you got Eric who works in Dallas, Texas, and he's been written up a couple of times, he's missed his numbers a few times, and he's not shown up, and you're gonna, yeah, that makes total sense. But if your people are delivering on what you say you want day in and day out, what does it matter? But
Yeah.
just that you
Yeah.
prompted me there.
Yeah. And that brings us to another subject, which is trust.
Mm.
If you're starting to demand people come back in the office, and believe me, if you're hearing this, if you're watching this, I'm not saying don't bring people back in the office. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
If you can do that, great, because I'm all about community. I'm all about, we're losing a lot with people not in the office. And by the way, this is a whole nother discussion. Let me tell you what you're losing. You're losing collaboration. You're losing innovation. You're losing added or multiplied productivity when you get multiple people together face to face in person. And Zoom and Skype and all Teams and all of that isn't going to do it. Did you know you lose 60 to 65% of what you would get in person by doing it virtually? And so virtual sales is tough because you're losing 60 to 65% of the input, micro expressions. You're losing body language. You're losing different kinds of things. But the whole point here is if we want to build trust so that we can gain that competitive advantage, what's the outcome of good trust levels? Higher engagement. What's the outcome of higher engagement? Greater productivity. What's the outcome of greater productivity? Greater profitability. There is a direct correlation between building trust and higher profitability. And yeah, I just lined out the sequence of that. When we talk about these things, these are, call them soft skills, call them emotional intelligence, call it whatever you want to. These are going to impact your bottom line more than anything else will. You can go buy a new computer system, you can buy a new, ERP system, you can do all kinds of different things. Everybody else has the same availability to that technology.
Yeah.
The only difference that you have in your workplace is how you equip and support your people and the people you have.
Well, Steve, I would say this too, and I think there's a definite need as well for empathy for the business owner, the risk taker.
Absolutely.
You and I travel on that road. Those men and women in that room were traveling on that road. because they not only have the weight of all the things we've been discussing, they also have the weight of they've put a lot of risk on the line for that particular business and its endeavors. And I think those folks are heavy. They're carrying a lot of weight too.
Absolutely. And I
And
hope I didn't come across, because I
oh,
am
I no,
I'm
no,
one of
I don't
those
think so.
guys.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, it's like, yeah, exactly. Right. But here's the thing. I mean, a problem is a problem, and it needs to be tackled. And I don't want to say that to mean someone should feel sorry for me because I'm an entrepreneur and I'm achieving a certain level of success and all the stuff that people perceive as being why it's so great to be an entrepreneur. It's not that. It's just, it's a flow of two ways, right? I do wish more employees understood the dynamics of owning a business and the risk that is involved in that, and the times when it gets quite lonely, right? I mean, if you've got an entrepreneurs group and business owners group, that's really, really a healthy thing, because some of these folks are out there flying alone as well. And I guess what I'm just saying, they're worthy of that empathy as well. I think it's all of us. It's just different levels of responsibility and role, I guess.
Yeah, and empathy is a two-way street.
Yeah.
Empathy goes both ways, and as it should. One of the most difficult things for some owners to really understand, or senior business leaders, is we all have a fallacy to tend to assume people understand things the same way that we do.
Yeah.
And the reality is, and I've said this over and over to owners over the years, they will never understand ownership the way you do. They've never had to make a payroll. They've never had to deal with the tax side of things. They've never had to go without a paycheck so that others could have a paycheck.
Yeah.
They've never had those experiences. So it's not fair to expect them to understand things the same way that you do. However, if we practice emotional intelligence, empathy, and listening, and we practice good soft skills like feedback and coaching's the soft skill.
Yeah.
If we practice those things with people, they can come to understand it.
Yeah, because then it's part of the culture, right?
Exactly. And that's why a lot of organizations, especially smaller businesses I work with, are basically going to open book, just full transparency on everything, all the financials and everything else. With some exceptions, we don't tell people how much we pay specific people. And I mean, that just liability things, that makes sense. But bottom line, the more transparent we can be, the better off we're going to be. And we know a sidelight of that came out of the Google study on teams. If the most effective teams have two things in common, and they're not anything that we thought they were. It's psychological safety and an equality of conversational sharing. Do people feel safe that they're not going to get punished if they say something? And does everybody get an equal amount of time to talk, to share their ideas and their thoughts? That's it. Those two things, that is what's driving some of the top performing teams. Well, that's not too hard to wrap our brains around. But what do we do about that? Going back to your fourth wheel concept, I just want to say something, Eric, that I think you'll agree with. And I hope everybody watching this will take just a moment. Usually the last thing that gets invested in is people development, because we got to pay for this, and we got to pay for this, we got to pay for this. Let me give you a challenge. If you'll put people development first, all of that will pay for everything else. I know it. I've seen it. If you invest in your people and their growth, they will pay you back, and all of that other stuff will be taken care of, because it won't be just you or a small team of people in your organization pushing to achieve what needs to be achieved. It'll be everybody from the top all the way down to the bottom. That is a whole different world.
Yeah, that's powerful. And maybe for another conversation, another time, Steve, it'd be interesting to talk about what are the blocks for that entrepreneur, that business owner from taking that kind of risk, because that's a level of risk that,
Sure.
again, I'd love to tell you I could pull out a spreadsheet that proves exactly to an nth of what you said. There is some data you can acquire that will show it. There's no doubt about that. But there is an element that is, for lack of a better way of saying it, is faith-based. It's my belief that if I invest in my people, that the return on that will deliver the kind of things that you just described. And quite frankly, I think it's worth the risk.
Yeah, I do too. And we just had an interesting case study close out that I'll be sharing in the near future. For organizations that will do that, for owners and entrepreneurs that will do what we just talked about, meaning invest in your people. I finished, and this has been a couple of years ago, but I finished working with one client who, in 1 year's time, we did an intensive coaching and training process in the things that we do. It's not just emotional intelligence. We use other assessments. We use a lot of other tools and methods. I mean, it's kind of a holistic approach, but in 1 year's time, they increased revenue 28% and they doubled their net profit in 1 year's time, giving us that year saying, okay, Steve, we'll agree to invest in you. Now, here's where Steve made the mistake. Steve should not have charged them a flat rate. Steve should have charged them a percentage of their growth.
Yes.
That was not smart on Steve's part. But
I was going to say, you should have taken the Eddie Murphy approach of I'll forego some of that salary for a percentage of the box office.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my.
But the great fun part is it works. Yeah. We know it works. And I'm excited about, and this may sound strange to people, I'm excited about the challenges ahead of us. I guarantee you we have some big ones coming. We have yet to see the mental health impact of what we've seen over the last 3 years. That tidal wave is still coming. Well, if you want to help your people on that side of things, Eric and I are people that work on the very front end of that. Before it gets into anything clinical, we're on the front end of that, helping people navigate emotions and build emotional intelligence skills so that they can better be more agile, be more resilient.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Eric.
I'm sorry. I'm thinking about a mutual friend, David Tubley. And I remember him saying, an organization or an individual can only draw upon the resources they have built up until the time of their crisis.
Yes. And
that still to this day, and I heard him say that, it's been years now, but that stuck with me, and it's such great wisdom.
Yeah.
And I think what we're the building of resources. Build your resources. And if a tidal wave is coming, and I'm in your camp in that regard. Well, now is the time to build the resources. Now is the time to reinforce the foundation. Now's the time to relook at the way the property has been excavated. It's doing all those things. It's not going to stop the tidal wave, but man, when the tidal wave hits you, you'll have built resources to certainly withstand. And who knows, maybe you won't suffer as much loss as you certainly would if you ignored it and determined, no, we're going to focus in on technology, or we're going to focus in on cost cutting. I just feel like that has stuck with me his statement. And I think so many owners, if they embrace that, it's that call to you, it's that call to me to say,
Yeah.
okay, let's begin this. Because burying our heads in the sand and saying, oh, young people are resilient, Steve, they're going to be fine. They're going to be fine. No, I'm sorry. Once again, you just experienced a tsunami, and it was called COVID.
Yeah.
You cannot pretend that won't have sort of these ripple effects going forward. So from that perspective, yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you.
Hey, that whole burying your head in the sand thing, the problem with that is if you bury your head in the sand, it exposes other parts of your body, you know? So you really want to think that one through, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
another wise statement.
Maybe a colorful statement,
Yeah,
but
okay, all right, I'll grant you.
a heads up approach is probably better.
Yeah,
Um, and yeah, I love David Tubley's, and I've stolen that quote, used it over and over because there's so much great wisdom in that. And you're right, now is the time to prepare. And I think a lot of people that may watch these videos, what are you worried about? Are you worried about a recession? Are you worried about talent? Are you worried about soft skills? Are you worried about where the next customer is going to come from? All of those are appropriate things that you can choose to worry about. But when you choose to worry, it is actually a choice of inaction versus a choice of action. And I would ask you to repurpose that worry into a more positive strategic outcome. Take the energy you're getting from that emotion of worry and change it, reframe it, and move it towards, okay, wait, instead of worrying about a recession or can't find the right talent or where's the next customer going to come from or all of that stuff that we tend to worry about, let's prepare ourselves for what comes next. Whatever that is.
yeah.
Let's just build up our resources because there is no harm done by having more resources to pull from.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think, Eric, that's the heart of where your and my work is in that helping people first realize what's possible. I think that's a big part of it. I don't think people understand that the foundation of soft skills is EQ, it's emotional intelligence. And I would debate that and support that and be the champion of that all day long. Because,
Agreed.
I've spent 35 plus years using the tools of psychology and that much or more in consulting and coaching and training and working with thousands of people and hundreds of organizations. And when you have, and this is not me blowing my horn saying, oh, I'm all that great. What it's saying is, I've seen a lot and I've experienced a lot. I've walked with people through a lot of tough stuff. And I know what works and what doesn't. And even in our new reality, the thing that has always worked in the past still works today, and that is people.
Yeah.
If we equip and prepare them well, they are the ones that are going to pull through. They're going to be the collaborators, the innovators, the people that will stand up and go above and beyond. People are amazing.
Yeah, and Steve, it's kind of full circle back to what you asked me at the beginning about AI and technology. It's like our greatest resource, our greatest opportunity for a return is human beings.
Yeah.
And I get it. I'm sure there are large organizations and small organizations, leaders from all stripes, right, that would say, well, they get on my nerves. They don't do this. They don't do. I totally I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
But typically you and I both know, Steve, that in the work that you've done and you take a look beneath the surface, you open up some closet doors, you find out that complaint that they don't do this, they don't do that is not just rooted in that person not doing, it's maybe the leadership factor right? And again, not throwing stones, not indicting and judging. I'm just saying human beings are the greatest resource. Let's pour our energy into developing them. I think it's worth the risk. I'm certain of it. Certain of it.
I believe, Eric, right with you. People in organizations today are the most unrealized return on investment available. I think there is a huge return on investment available if people will invest in their people, if leaders will invest, if owners will invest in their people, because they're already there. And if you can upskill them, if you can help them to better engage and produce more through being more a part of what's going on, to feeling like they belong. You know,
Yeah.
when we look at the 5 driving forces of motivation, accomplishment and safety and belonging and self-worth, recognition, the 5 driving forces of motivation, and we have an assessment that will measure that. When we look at that, it really helps us understand if somebody is not motivated, they're not getting the internal motivation, that internal well of motivation refilling itself. That's where your energy comes from.
Yeah.
And you talked about the importance of energy versus time, and we talked about accomplishments versus hours, and there's so many ways to look at this, but it really comes down to the same things. There's really nothing new under the sun, is there, Eric? I mean, we know that the focus, the more we focus on people, and I don't know about you, I was talking to a young leader the other day, Eric. Is such an interesting young man, come out of a very difficult upbringing, and just a quality human being. And he looked at me with just such an open heart and said, I don't know what I don't know. Can you help me? That's who I want to work with. I will pour myself into that person because, number one, they have a growth mindset, not a fixed mindset.
Yep.
And they want to learn. They want to be better. They want to grow. It will not surprise me in the least if he ends up owning a Fortune 500 company someday or running one.
Yeah.
Because that is the type of leader, that leader that truly knows they need to develop themselves first before they try to develop other people.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And I think it's interesting. Just a brief story. One of our clients is a fairly large fire department. They cover multiple counties, and they've been a great client with us. And one of the things is we've been doing more and more work with them. You know, we started off with the hierarchy in that world. You know, it's chief, captains, lieutenants, and that kind of deal. And they tell me about the number of, we would call them kids, young people, right? That come in,
right?
Who they gave me one example of they asked them, okay, you're going to be your turn to go to the grocery store and buy for the station, and the kid looked at him and kind of like, well, what do you want me to do? Well, I want you to go to the grocery store and buy. He had never done that. No one had ever shown him. Right now, I thought for a minute, like, well, that's pretty funny. Boy, I bet you they had a. But then I started thinking, well, wait a minute, what happened? And I'm not going to go on the path of indicting parenthood, right? Because I'm a parent, so I got to be.
Yeah, because we're parents too,
right.
right?
Yeah, so I'm not throwing any stones here. But it got me to realize that, one of the important things is, again, the resource building is also equipping people for a future.
Yeah.
That, we don't know, but we can get a sense about where the wind is blowing. and their ability to do the kind of things that will be necessary. And the fact that, to your point, Steve, if there are people out there like you and me and others who are willing to pour themselves into, maybe we're moving in a direction where these will be problems. I mean, they're there, but solving them will have a greater likelihood.
Yeah.
Lack of a better way of saying it.
And it's funny. It's almost like we have come full circle today, because the more and faster technology changes,
Mm-hmm.
the more important it is becoming for us to not forget the human element.
Yep.
To not neglect human development. I fully believe that, because otherwise, what's the end game? Do you lose yourself in the technology and we become obsolete as human beings? That makes no sense.
No, and there's a steep decline there, Steve. If I mean, and I get it. I don't want to sound dystopian in this, but I mean, I'm not sure. Do you want to live in a world like that?
Yeah.
I mean, where you can push a button and you can record a statement and ask for a response and you get it, but it seems to me that that's not. And again, it'd be different, Steve, if you and I were on here saying we got to get rid of AI, we gotta cut this out.
Yeah.
That would be different. That would be something where someone could say you're just so radically connected to your own opinion. We're saying, again, it's back to that emotional intelligence, sort of the foundational idea that it's taking what we think and what we feel and having it work together, thought and emotion. For what we're saying is human beings and IA, not AI and then human beings. Well, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. No.
Better.
I mean, it's funny because it's the same thing as our rational mind and our emotional mind. Yeah. Is it one over the other? No, it's not. They move in parallel. When they move in parallel, we make our best decisions. We take our best actions. We do our best thinking. Technology and human beings together moving forward. But technology will always, or should always, be serving human beings, not the other way around.
Agreed.
I think that's critical. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Steve. I really appreciate you having me on.
I'm going to stop the